Hey, I'm glad you're here. We're going to have an exciting session for just a few minutes, and we're going to be talking about F&I and some F&I best practices, and I'm also going to go over a few benchmarks. Really excited about this topic. So raise your hand if you're a buy here, pay here dealer. Awesome. And raise your hand if you're doing some or entertaining the idea of doing retail in the future. Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to talk about F&I specific to subprime. So I think that if you're in the buy here, pay here space and you have absolutely no intention of learning anything F&I related, I'll do my best to keep it relevant for the buy here, pay here as well. But we're going to be focused on subprime retail and how to maximize dollars in the back end. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Justin Osborne. I'm with NIADA, and I've been a dealer as well. Steve Jordan mentioned earlier, I've been a buy here, pay here dealer. I started a buy here, pay here dealership south of Kansas City in 2007, grew that to about 800 accounts. So it was a pretty good little buy here, pay here, and did that till 2014. And then I went on to the new car side, where I was the general manager of a GMC Buick Chevy store for several years. And they came to NIADA to do 20 group moderation. So I'm the retail 20 group moderator for NIADA. I'm also the senior instructor for the Certified Master Dealer Program. So if you're interested in CMD, we've got one coming up in October. We do 2 of them a year. They're absolutely incredible. Think Dealer Academy for the independent dealer. But if you'd like more information about the CMD program, you can flag me down. I'm going to be here for the next couple of days in the NIADA Lounge, which is right in the middle of the exhibit hall. So be sure to come by if we haven't met and shake my hand and introduce yourselves, and we can talk about any of those programs you may be interested in. I live in Sarasota, Florida. This is my family. I've got a wife named Kendall, and that's my 5-year-old son named Kingston Gray. Everybody calls him Gray. And they are certainly a very supportive and important part of my life. Let's dive in. We got a lot to cover real quick. So I'm going to dive into this F&I conversation. From the subprime retail perspective, there are 2 main models. There are 2 main models that are really relevant right now in the industry. The first, as far as how you're running your used vehicle department. So think everything about how your processes are inlaid, what processes you're using. There are 2 main models that we see today. So the first model is what we would call the traditional F&I model, borrowing kind of the traditional vehicle model or process from the new car store or the franchise store. In this model, you typically will have a sales force, and then you'll have sales management, primarily a desking manager, and a sales manager, an assistant sales manager, or a closer. And by the way, if you have a worksheet, I've put most of my talking points on that worksheet to try to give you some background. Also, you would have more of a traditional F&I manager. So this would be a dedicated sales-oriented person that's in charge of several things, but primarily selling product and services to the buyers, as well as keeping the dealer compliant. So a traditional F&I manager is one of the main focuses of that position is to keep everybody out of trouble, to keep people compliant, especially the dealer, represents the dealer principal. And then also spinning the bank paperwork, getting approvals and things of that nature, depending upon how you're set up. Now, there are 100 hybrids or variations of this model, and I'll give you some examples. You might have collateral sales managers and an F&I manager that works for those sales managers, and the sales team that work for the sales managers, but not the F&I manager. You might have less sales managers and a closer. I'll give you the most common hybrid is where either the F&I manager is submitting the approvals to the bank, or the desk manager from the tower or the sales manager submitting approvals to the bank. That's a hybrid, for example. Who's submitting your loan? Typically in a retail deal, the most critical part, and the most outside of inventory acquisition, of course, everything starts when you buy the car, right? But the most critical piece to the process is going to be desking the deals. That's the most important thing. Who is in charge of submitting your deals to the lenders, getting the approval? Because there's so many nuances with getting strong approvals and good calls. For example, if you've got an amateur that's submitting loan applications to lenders, they may not know those lenders' terms. And if you're not really familiar with the lender's terms, you're going to have a difficult time getting the best calls back from those lenders. It is the absolute most critical thing to have the most knowledgeable and experienced person submitting loans to the lenders or loan applications to the lenders with the right deal structure. So On number one here, you see I have traditional F&I office. This would be a traditional F&I person that would be responsible for that, or somebody on the desk. The other model that's really, I've seen it gaining ground over the last 2 years, is a cradle to grave. In this model, there is no F&I manager at all. There typically is 1 or 2 sales managers or desking managers that are working all of the deals or with the salespeople. And the salespeople are actually staying with their customers from front to back, and they're doing F&I. They're talking about product, and if you're a buy here, pay here dealer, this would include things like spin and paper and offer and think products like CPI. And they're doing all of it. Now, they may have and there's hybrids to this version. For example, you might have sales managers that will allow a sales professional to go from a certain part of the sales process and then stop, and then they get involved. For example, everybody in here have heard of the road to the sale? Okay. Or how many of you have a sales steps inside your store? Like, this is our sales process. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So traditionally in the car business, especially on the new car side, the road to the sale was 10 steps to the sale. And it started off with a meet and greet, establish common ground, and car the customer down. Anybody ever heard that before? Meet and greet, establish common ground, transfer trust, car them down. So that's where a lot of the hybrid version of a cradle to grave would be where you tell your sales professionals in the process, you're going to work these customers from the meet and greet, you're going to establish common ground, you're going to car them down, and some people call them car showers. Have you heard that one? I heard that one last week. I haven't heard that one before. Car showers. They're not really selling cars anymore. I wouldn't call them order takers. Their job is to build relationships, to build trust, to work through the inventory, to do vehicle selection with the buyer. And at that point, once we've pretty much picked out the car, then we're going to 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 a manager. And the manager's going to come in and close the deals, go over the number, and then do any products or back end as well. So that's a hybrid of the cradle to grave because there's still no F&I manager in that mix. So these are the 2 most common models in today's independent retail store or subprime store by far. And there are others. You know, I probably could list 4 or 5 other models that just don't have as much traction. But I think it's important, the last note I'll make on this and we'll move on, many dealers that I work with, and that's all I do is fly around and work with dealers all over the country every day. Many dealers that I work with, this is an important part, and even if you're in a buy here, pay here store, it all starts with how your used vehicle department is going to be structured. I mean, the structure is critical because it's the, I guess, predicate to who's going to be doing what. And before you can install a solid process, we have to know what the frame in the used vehicle department is going to look like. So how many sales managers do you need? Who's desking deals? Who's allowed to make who's doing the repricing on your vehicle inventory if you're doing that? Buy here, pay here, you may not be doing a lot of repricing. Who's doing the initial meet and greets? Who's answering the phones? All these things are contingent upon having a frame, a very well framed. And I've got this little outline of an organizational chart. An exercise that you could do, this wasn't really in my notes, but one exercise you could do is that we do with a lot of dealers, we do it in CMD, is if you draw your organization out on a piece of paper and you leave all of the names out, you just start drawing boxes of what your organization needs, what positions it needs, and what they'll do. And then once you have that frame and you're like, this is it, this is the way we need to do, this is the frame of our used vehicle department, then start entering in the names. You're going to find you got some people on the sideline that you can't put in a box. And then that's a hard question. You know, what do we do with this person? This is the model that we need to be in. We've got these, 5 or 10 or 15 or 30 or 100 employees, and I've got a good box for 75% of them, but what is Johnny really doing? And does that fit into what the frame of our used vehicle department is going to look like? I want to just hit 2 what I feel like are very underestimated, underutilized, and critical efforts to increasing your F&I. And the first one is the F&I interview process. I'm going to just lay these out for you real quick. Now, how many of you know what a TO is? Everybody knows what a TO is, right? A turnover. So on the sales side, whether you're buy here, pay here, or retail, on the sales side, we need to get the manager in early, not late. When I started the car business and the new car business back in like 2005, it was a Royal Toyota and Volvo in Bloomington, Indiana. I had a new car manager, and when I took my first up, I did everything right. I thought I did everything right. Met the customer on the lot, did the old Joe Verdi wander around for an hour and a half. Everybody's hot, all my customers are sweating. We're all hot and tired. We finally land them on a minivan or something, and this was a big guy with his family. And I was so excited because we were about to close a deal. And I go up to my manager. I said, "Hey, he's really interested in this minivan. I think we got a deal here, boss." I'm so excited. I'm brand new. It's my first deal. And he hands me a pencil. It's a Foursquare. Anybody know what Foursquare is? Okay, all right. So he hands me a Foursquare, and I go out and I show him the numbers. And as soon as I spin the Foursquare around, this gentleman just stands right up, puts his hands on his hips, looking down at me. Big dude. And I'm looking, and I didn't know nobody trained me on this part, right? It's like, what do I do now? Can you sit back down? So I show him the numbers. He stands up and he's offended. He goes, "You're not giving me near enough for my trade. We're not even close. I'm leaving." And I was like, "Okay, can you give me 1 second? Because I'm new here and I'm supposed to let my manager talk to everybody." This is literally what I told him. "I'm new here. I'm supposed to let my manager talk to everybody. Let me go grab him if you'll just wait 1 second. So I run over in a hurry. I get with my new car manager, Brian. I'm like, "Brian, look, I have this guy locked down. I don't know what you put on that piece of paper, but whatever it is, he's ready to get out of here. So do you want to do one of those TO things now and come in here?" And Brian kind of rolls his eyes. You know how desk managers are. Gets up. He goes, "I'll talk to him." And he starts walking out to meet this guy. And I'm thinking, here we go. Got the manager coming now. Gonna do a little Andrew Carnegie on this guy, see what he says. I can't wait to hear what Brian's about to say to get this guy to sit down and recommit to buying this vehicle. And so sure enough, Brian walks out there and he takes I'll never forget this. He takes a business card out of his pocket and he hands it to the guy and he goes, "Sir, Justin tells me we're far apart on your trade. Hey, I really appreciate you coming in. My name's Brian. I'm the new car manager, and if I can do anything to earn your business in the future, we'd love for you to give us another try. Have a great day." And the guy walks out the door, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what is that? I could have done that. I mean, I was basically doing that. I didn't understand. And then Brian turned to me, and he said, "Listen, if you TO me in these deals when the customers are already aggravated or upset or leaving or they're unsatisfied, then you're not going to sell a lot of cars." So that was my introduction very early into an early TO. And we skip this step a lot. But I'll guarantee you we sell cars. And I know in buy here, pay here, it's more financing and you use cars as the collateral. But we're selling cars. And who do you think is the person on the ground at your store that knows the inventory better than anybody? Whew, you got a good sales staff. You do. Typically, it's going to be your owner, if your owner's working the floor. Whoever's buying the cars and operating the used vehicle department knows the inventory better than anybody, hands down. Why? Think about it. Who did a run list at the auction prior to deciding what we needed to buy to fill holes? Who went to the auction or now online? Who decided who was bidding on cars? Who bought the car? Who arranged transport and delivery to get it to your lot? Who ran it through service? Who got it stocked into the DMS or made sure it was stocked into the DMS? Who made sure somebody took 2 quick pictures so we could get them online right away while it go through time to line? I mean, who authorized the service repairs, whether you're using a third-party independent or you're doing it in-house? I mean, your sales manager or your dealer, if you're an operating dealer, does all that. And so who's looking at the inventory if you're retail, every Monday, hopefully every day these days, every Monday to look to see if you need to do some type of a price reduction. That's going to be your management staff or the owner, depending on the size of your store. So while we encourage the sales professionals to walk the lot every day to know the inventory because it's a critical piece of their job, the buyer or the sales manager is the one that's going to know the inventory better than anybody, hands down every time. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're selling cars, who do you want involved in the deal? Would you not want the guy that knows the inventory or the gal that knows the inventory better than anybody? You're selling cars, and the guy or gal that knows the inventory better than anybody is not injected into the deal. It's a mistake out of the gate. So typically, whether you have an appointment, we should be coming to work with appointments, or a drive up. When we're working the sales process with the customer, we want to get the manager, the buyer, we used to call them MODs, manager on duty, or if you're an owner-operator and you're working deals and shaking hands with customers every day, that's you. We want to get involved right in the car down process, right in the vehicle selection process. Now, And it doesn't have to be very laborious. Typically a great handoff or a great TO is just using form. And I'm going a little bit out of order here, but 5 is form. Form, family, occupation, recreation, message. I talk about form a lot. It's a great way to, a little acronym that everybody in the entire dealership can remember that catalyzes quick conversations. So, and this is in your notes as well. So F is family, O is occupation, R is recreation, and M is message, family, occupation, recreation, message. So this is just conversation starters. So a good solid TO, when we're looking at what vehicle we're gonna select to put the customer in, would be the manager just coming by. Anybody ever been to a restaurant and after you've been seated and after you've had drinks ordered, all of a sudden the general manager or the owner of the restaurant comes by and, hey, how you guys doing? Thanks for coming by today. Really glad you came by to dine with us tonight. You needed anything? I'm the GM. My name's Justin. Hey, I'm going to be over there wandering around for a little while. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks again. That's a TO. Does that make sense? Notice that the GM or the owner of the restaurant came and met you before you found the hair in your food, right? Because it's hard to get mad at somebody when you know them. So same drill on a car deal. I want to get the manager involved that's penciling the deal, desking the deal, or the F&I. I want to get them involved as quickly as possible. So when we're doing vehicle selection, the manager comes in and just does a form. Family, occupation, recreation. You got to, hey, how you guys doing? My name's Justin. I'm the owner, or or whatever you want to call yourself, or whoever it is. I'm the manager on duty today, or I'm the manager. Great to see you guys. Thanks for coming and giving us opportunity here at ABC Autos. You guys from around here? You guys you got some kids? Or they go to school? Where do they go to school at? Occupation, recreation, message. You can run through that very quickly. This is literally a 60-second, 2-minute deal. You don't want to spend a lot of time here because we're trying to make the sales process quicker, more efficient for the customer's benefit because that's what they want. Now, also during this TO, you want to do what we call a car down really quickly too. So I know my sales professionals are already doing vehicle selection, but I want to do a vehicle selection as well because I don't know about you, but usually if you select a vehicle for a customer to test drive or to look at buying and it turns out to be the wrong vehicle for whatever reason, how many of you know in here that your odds of closing that customer now have dramatically decreased if you have to switch vehicles? Not every time, doesn't mean they're not going to buy, but your probability starts to decline if you're going to have to show them multiple vehicles. So I also want to do a quick car down. What brought you guys in today? What are you looking for in a vehicle? Now, that's a traditional TO with management, which we're not even talking about today. What we're talking about is the F&I interview process. How many of you have ever had familiar with an F&I interview process? So whether you have an F&I manager or not, now again, this is mostly retail subprime, whether you have an F&I manager or not, you still need to be doing an interview. This will maximize your gross on the back end, there's no doubt. It's a basic, it's underutilized, but and I'm just gonna use for time's sake, because we only have a few minutes, I'm just gonna use the situation where you have an F&I manager that's dedicated to F&I selling product. In this case, and these are in the notes that I provided to you as well, I think on the second page, in the F&I process, your F&I manager would simply go out, touch the sales desk, make sure that they're familiar with that I've loaded the deal, we have an approval, and I'm going to go out and meet the customer. And I'm going to sit them down, hey, customer, great news, we've got an approval for you. That's no problem at all. I'm excited about that. Well, I'm just going to sit down. It'll take me about 8 or 10 minutes, or just a few minutes, and I'll have you in my office. But I just want to ask you a few questions before I print your paperwork, your state and your local paperwork. And I'm going to run through a series of questions, but what I'm really trying to identify is how long is vehicle ownership? How long do they own their vehicle? How many miles do they put on their vehicle a year? And what experiences they've had with F&I products in the past? For example, do you have an extended service contract that maybe we need to cancel? It's a great question. Instead of talking about selling them something, hey, maybe you've got some type of a product on this vehicle that you're trading in that we need to cancel. It's a great intro. And I'm just going to try to find those things out while using form. This way, the F&I manager can go back in to his or her office, load the deal, and prep an F&I menu. F&I menus are critical these days. One, for compliance, it keeps the dealer out of hot water. And two, once you get familiar with a good F&I menu, they're pretty easy to sell product off of. The F&I, in this interview process, the F&I manager would load the deal, notify the sales desk, introduce the prospect, do an introduction to the prospect, I like using blank sheets of paper because it doesn't seem as formal or threatening to the customer. So I'm gonna sit down with the customer with a blank sheet of paper. Hey guys, we're excited, got your loan approved. Gonna ask you a few questions here. Gonna have you in my office in no time at all. By the way, your trade-in, do you have an extended service contract on that we can cancel? I'm gonna move into my questions. The basic questions is 6. Review the trade, recap, and move on. Then from that point, again, your F&I manager can go in the office, load the paperwork, load the deal, and get prepped to bring that customer in and deliver the car and do the F&I and show the menu. Another thing is the transition of the customer to the F&I office. If you're doing paperwork removed from the sales floor and the customer's getting up and moving to some area, some office that they're doing the final paperwork on, that transition to sell product and subprime, and also CPI could be used in this in the buy here, pay here, depending if your salesperson's spinning paper or you're handing it off to somebody else. But not complicated, this transition. It's just all about if you have a process. Here, the sales pro would, once the F&I manager or the person spinning the paper is ready, here the sales pro would just simply bring his customer to the office or that area, just reintroduce, because you've already introduced, which is good. The customer would sit down, and then this is a good tactic to use. The sales professional would then leave. The F&I person or the person spinning paper would begin to talk about the paperwork that's ready to be signed that's non-term related. Which I've listed in your handout, all non-term related paperwork, state, local paperwork, things like that, WEOs, credit applications that need to be signed, all that jazz. So the F&I manager gets started delivering that, and then have your sales professional just pop their head back in 20 seconds later and say, hey, real quick, Justin, don't forget to tell John about the CPI product. I think he's really gonna want that. Or don't forget to, and if you're not buy here, pay here, if you're a retail especially, this is a very good strategy to use. Have the sales professional stick their head back in to the F&I manager or the manager and say, hey, don't forget to tell John about the extended service contract. It's a great best practice. You should do it on every deal. It'll help your penetrations go up. And speaking about penetrations, in our last few moments, I just want to kind of go over some of the retail benchmarks in F&I, just to give you an idea of what your peers in the industry are doing in 2019 on the back end. We'll start with finance income. So, and the way we define finance income is going to be rate and reserve. So if you're getting any reserve or any rate bumps from the bank, that would be finance income. And you can see on these stats here, finance versus retail, the benchmark is 65 out of 96 deals, and the volume isn't important here, it's just the ratio. The ratio is 67.5%. So this means if you're a retail dealer and you want the indirect loan, if you're a buy here, pay here, you're thinking about doing retail one day, it all begins with making sure you're capturing the financing. So when I say capturing the financing, this is where you would strike relationships, lender agreements with local lenders and national lenders and regional lenders. We have a lender fair going on, so that you can do an indirect loan and you can get rate and reserve from that bank. And that's what I mean by finance income. So 67.5% penetration is not necessarily excellent. We have dealers that do a lot higher than that, but you certainly don't want to be in the 40%, 50% or lower. What this stat means is if you took 96 and subtracted 65, that would be the cash deals left over. Does that make sense? So this is all non-cash deals, 67.5. It's very difficult to sell things like extended service contracts, gap policies, and all the ancillary products if you don't capture the financing. I mean, people do it, and I meet some dealers that are really proud of that. We have I've met dealers that say, we have really low indirect lending or really low financing. We do a lot of cash, but we sell a lot of extended service contracts. But that's all they're selling. They're not selling ancillary products. They're not selling gap policies. And all that's income that you need these days, because I don't know about you guys, but if you're in retail, we all know that profits margins are thinning. It's getting more competitive. It's getting more difficult every day. And it's hard to capitalize on the front end gross. Buy here, pay here understands a little different than that. So that is what we mean by finance income. If we look at extended service contracts right now in the industry, and this is 2019, extended service contracts, 39 out of 96. 39 out of 96. That's 40.5%. That's the benchmark. What's the benchmark? The benchmark is the top half of the average of the top 50%. So we take all of NIAD's aggregated data on the independent retail dealers in the country that we have data on, and we take the top 50% dealers, cut the number in half, and then we average that. So basically like the top 25%. Does that make sense? So right now, the extended service contract penetration benchmark is 40.5%. So if you're doing 100 deals, 40 of them have extended service contracts on them. The extended service contract per contract gross profit is $951 per deal. Also, this is a great area when you're talking F&I to look at the reinsurance options. If you're a dealer and you don't have reinsurance, this conversation is where reinsurance comes in. Because if I'm selling, I don't know if I have a pointer, but if I'm that $951 represents your money, the gross profit, but you still have to pay a product company for the cost of the product, and you can reinsure that, you can own that. If you don't know about that, there's a lot of providers here that can talk to you about that, but it's a great strategy for long-term wealth accumulation. Let's look at GAAP. So if you notice GAAP, it says 45 out of 65. Well, why doesn't it say 96? It's because we're only going to be working GAAP deals on indirect loans. So if they're paying cash, we're not probably going to sell them a GAAP. So 45 out of 65, that's about 70%, 69.2%. So you can think about any of the retails you're doing. If you're doing 10 retail deals, if you're doing 100 retail deals, how many GAAP policies are you selling? The gross profit on GAAP right now is running $298 per contract. And there's some state, I know there's some state limitations too. You could probably drive the GAAP policy gross profit up tremendously if it wasn't capped in a lot of states. Ancillary products. So when we talk about ancillary, this is huge, especially for you if you're doing retail or subprime. This is huge when it comes to your bottom line, and that's ancillary products. Things like tire and wheel, paint protection, some maintenance programs. All these types of programs, Etch would be an example. Anybody ever heard of Etch? Etch is a great example. These are products that you can really maximize gross profit on. Now, look at the benchmark on this one. For the ancillary benchmark, 98 out of 65, the penetration is 150%. Well, you might say, well, how can that be possible? Well, that's an accurate number. The reason why is because many dealers that are maximizing on ancillary products aren't just selling them one. They're selling them multiples. They're selling paint protection and a GAAP policy. Or not a GAAP, but they're selling them paint protection and tire and wheel, or paint protection and a maintenance program. So this is, I would say, the most underutilized area for a retail dealer is the ancillary side. And you know what the response that I get, especially I do all the retail 20 groups for NIADA. So we have this conversation a lot. It's page 8 in the 20 group composite, page 8 for retail, because we spend a lot of time on page 8 because the gross profits are weak. To be honest with you, they're weak. And it's a lot of it is just because dealers don't have a good education on what ancillary products are out there that they can utilize. That's really the number one reason. And that's a great reason to be here. If you're interested in learning more about those products, there's a full exhibit hall of all kinds of people that can offer you these types of products that you can sell. But think about this. Anybody know what your holding costs are? Anybody ever heard of holding cost in your operation? How much money it costs you to run your dealership, whether you sell one car or not? You think about that. Think about all the fixed and operational costs you have to operate your business and to stay open, whether you sell one car or you sell 100. That's a form of your holding costs. You've already spent the advertising dollars. You've already done all the work to drive traffic to your store. You've already got a team in place that you've had to train. Now you've went through the whole sales process. You finally got someone that's excited to buy a car, and now you got them sitting in the F&I office, and all you have to do is have a product lineup to show them, understand it, and offer it to them. I guarantee you, if you're not making money in ancillary products, I guarantee you, I see it every time in the 20 group programs with the retail dealers. If you're not selling ancillary products and you just add it to your menu and offer it to everybody, you're going to sell a bunch. It just happens. People just say yes. They're good products. So don't underestimate ancillary. It's key to maximizing your gross per vehicle sold. Key. Total back end right now in retail is $873 on the back gross. That's the benchmark for F&I income on the back end. And last, I wanted to touch on F&I compensation. How we figure F&I compensation for retail deals is typically based on the amount of gross profit that's generated from F&I products or back-end products. So your rate, what we just talked about, your rate and reserve, your extended, and your product lineup. Whatever gross profit that's totaling, the benchmark right now is 13.3% of that gross profit number would be your F&I person or your F&I manager's compensation. Does that make sense? 13.3% of your back-end gross profit. Now, dealers have 50 ways from Sunday to get there, to get to that 13.3%. And whatever type of a pay plan you would put together or incentive plan that you would put together to get the bottom line, and why I'm sharing this with you is you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you're not spending more than 13.3%. I'm amazed it happens. And you know, sometimes you just don't know what you know. When you see a dealer spending 28% or 30% of their back-end gross and F&I compensation. So 13.3% is the number where you want to be. So if you need more information on this topic, we've got a ton of resources at NIADA we'd love to give you on your very last sheet. If you need more information on this topic or others, feel free, you can fill that sheet out, tear it off and hand it to me, and I'll try to get you any resources you need. Be sure to swing by the NIADA Lounge. Are there any questions that we've got a couple of minutes? I'm happy to break and close because that's what I prepared today. But are there any questions about F&I, even if it's buy here, pay here related that anybody has from the floor? Sir. 281. His question was, what was a benchmark on gap? Any other questions? Awesome. Well, appreciate you guys being here. Great to see everybody here in Chicago. We're going to have a great day planned for you. And again, make sure if I haven't met you, I'd love to meet you. So be sure to come by at the exhibit hall. And with that, we'll adjourn. And have a great day. And everybody in the front row gets an A+. Good job.